So earlier today, I was a guest over on the YouTube channel, Big Talk, Little Talk. For those of you who know the channel, had a nice long discussion today with Israel. We went over a lot of topics. First time I've ever been, a guest on someone else's channel. Hopefully the first of many to come. I'm working on getting some people over on this show as well. Start working on some collaboration stuff. Trying to get a lot of the Team Tulsi and Tulsi supporters. A lot of people who are, back in Tulsi, Bernie, Andrew Yang, start trying to get everyone working together here, promoting the message, hearing a back and forth exchange of some thoughts. So that was the point of this video. Now, for those of you who have watched all my videos, I'm going to go ahead and give you the, disclaimer up front. This isn't going to be, some people consider my videos already fairly long. I've been known to run them anywhere from around 12 minutes. I've gone all the way up to about 45, 50 minutes in just one video, and I had a long topic to try and cover. This is going to be my longest video by far that you're going to see with the Big Talk, Little Talk. We went for over 2 hours on this video. But if you can, if you hang in, you watch the whole thing, one thing I will say about it is it's quality content, quality back and forth, discussion of ideas and what's going on with Tulsi Gabbard, the DNC, and many other issues. I will go ahead and say this, the first little start of the live stream, it was kind of choppy. The video is not going to play very smoothly for probably, I would say maybe, I think it was like 2 or 3 minutes into the clip. After that, it, cleans up, clears up from there. So if you notice that up front, you'll be able to hear the audio. It's going to take the video a little bit of time to clear up. And one final point that I want to throw in, I'm going to be making a video about this later. Could maybe even be in the morning. It's probably going to take a while for this video to upload, honestly. But apparently, you're going to hear us talk. We talk about Kamala Harris a little bit and the significance with her supposed to be making the next round of debates, and her poll percentages and how her campaign was basically going broke. And why something smells fishy about that. We do talk about that, but I want to go ahead and just point this out up front. She's dropped out. So reportedly Kamala Harris is no more. Tulsi flatlined Kamala Harris. People might have a different opinion on that, but in my opinion, I think the consistent calling out of Kamala Harris in 2 debates by Tulsi Gabbard, took a sledgehammer to Kamala Harris's campaign, and reportedly now she's done. She's done. So again, let that sink in when all the mainstream media has been telling you, and a lot of these, neo-progressive YouTubers like David Pakman have been saying, oh, Tulsi Gabbard has no chance. Well, the polls said that Kamala Harris was polling higher than Tulsi Gabbard, okay? And as you're going to see in this video, she was polling higher than Tulsi Gabbard was, but Tulsi Gabbard was getting all these individual donations into her campaign, so was Andrew Yang, and yet somehow Kamala Harris made the next round of debates, but as of right now, Andrew Yang and Tulsi Gabbard are still on the outside looking in, trying to get into that debate. So Kamala Harris qualified, wasn't taking in as much money, but she was polling higher. Now, how do you poll higher and have support from more people, yet no one wants to contribute to you? Yet plenty of people seem to be contributing to Tulsi and Yang more, yet they're polling lower. And matter of fact, so many people were not contributing to you that it has now resulted in you dropping out of this race. If that doesn't, if you don't smell a rat with these polls, take some medicine, because you've clearly got some stuffed up sinuses if you can't get a whiff of that, stink coming off of that whole scenario there. But nonetheless, let's just go ahead and jump straight into it. Hope you guys enjoy it, and hopefully this is, the first of many of discussions between me and Israel with Big Talk, Little Talk. Hope you enjoy the clip.
Talk some politics. All right, what's up, everybody? It's your boy Israel here, and I've got a special guest with me today, the Vigilant Independent. Did I get that right?
Yes, sir.
How's it going, man? How's your day going?
It's going pretty good. A little cold down here in South Carolina for us, but,
I got the sun shining over here in Colorado, which is nice. Nice
Yeah.
to have the sun out. So, Vigilant Independent here. He runs his own channel. I believe that's what it's called, right? Vigilant Independent. The Vigilant
That's on
Independent.
my Twitter handle. My channel's the Independent Report.
Oh, right, the Independent Report. So definitely go check out his channel on YouTube. So today we're gonna be talking about just a couple things here. Kind of keep it kind of loose, keep the conversation kind of going. Hopefully we don't have any technical issues. It wouldn't be YouTube if and live if there weren't any technical issues. But so you guys kind of are familiar with my political philosophy, kind of where I stand on things. Um, and I know that you're a big Tulsi Gabbard supporter, so why don't we kind of start off with that? How did you
Definitely.
get introduced to Tulsi, and what got you to kind of embrace her campaign?
So honestly, when I first started looking at the 2020 candidates, the first one that I really heard about, took a liking to, was actually very early on Richard Ojeda, and he didn't last very long in the race at all. He was in and out in the blink of an eye.
Right.
Um, then gradually through watching some of Kyle Kalinski's videos, but more or less actually the one who really got me turned on to Tulsi and started seeing more and more about her was Jimmy Dore.
Mm.
Jimmy Dore's covered her quite a bit, since she first started. She launched her campaign, and so I started watching more and more of her policy. Started hearing, the foreign policy thing, getting out of all the wars, and that is a huge, huge thing to me because I mean, how long has this country been in at least one war? But of course, for over 10 years now, we've been in multiple. So
Right.
that's a huge thing, and that was one of the big things I took into consideration in 2016 as well. So that really got me interested in Tulsi. And then the more I started watching, learned about her from back in 2016, stepping down as vice chair of the DNC, to support Bernie Sanders, and she didn't want to support what the DNC and Hillary were trying to do
Right.
to Bernie behind the scenes. That showed me, okay, so what I'm hearing from her is probably not just a bunch of rhetoric like most other politicians. She clearly is someone of her principles and her morals. And if she thinks it's wrong, she's not going to support it just for politics. So
Right.
that really spoke a lot to her character for me, and again gave me a lot of respect for her.
Right.
Another thing that really gained a lot of respect is the fact that she's currently still in Congress and yet currently still serving in the military. Now, how
Right.
many people do you know that do that? So
Not a lot.
that really, put a lot of respect in me for her. And so ever since, I've really been, cheering her on, pushing her agenda, just because I feel like out of the people running, if I had to rank the top three right now on the Democratic side, it's going to
Yeah.
be Tulsi one,
Hmm.
Yang number two, and then Bernie number three.
All right, man. Yeah. Well, I kind of came upon her the same way. I kind of covered her campaign early on when she launched. You know, Congresswoman from Hawaii. I got to know her a little bit when she was campaigning for Bernie Sanders. So,
All right.
back in 2016, I was a huge Bernie Sanders supporter and all of that. And when I saw her, risk everything, and people didn't really know that, people weren't really aware of the fact that Tulsi Gabbard, and we're streaming good. It looks like everything kind of fixed itself, so that's great news. Um, people didn't really know like the sacrifice it took to like stand up to the DNC, especially at the time when the DNC was hard at work rigging the election for Bernie in 2016, and Julian
Oh yeah.
Assange had put out, um, the emails and all of that, the whole Clinton email stuff, and it kind of showed, oh, the DNC is mad rigged, like it's it's a fucking corrupt swamp.
Yeah. Just exposed politics in a way a lot of people suspected but never saw the proof of right out in the open.
Right, exactly.
And then that put it right out in the open.
Yeah, so kind of getting into this Tulsi Gabbard story. So this first story we kind of want to talk about is just kind of uh, giving our analysis on like Tulsi Gabbard's foreign policy, because I constantly hear that Bernie Sanders is the best on foreign policy. I've done a couple videos on that talking about Bernie Sanders' kind of hawkishness during the 90s and kind
Yeah.
of Russiagate and some talking points on Venezuela. and all of that.
Exactly.
So the way I look at foreign policy, man, is like, we shouldn't intervene in anybody else's business and how they run their country. You know what I mean?
No, no.
It's one thing to do trade and to have peaceful negotiations with a country, and certain deals with a country, because economic reasons and others, just security reasons. But when you start putting political pressure on other countries, you open yourself up to political pressure as well. So,
Yeah.
obviously we're the big bad person in the schoolyard right now, so nobody
Hmm.
really messes with us too much. But what's your take on that? The whole imperial, U.S. imperialism and like foreign regime change and stuff like that Tulsi sometimes really focuses on.
Well, 3 points here, and I'll give my opinion on a lot of what Tulsi's pointed out at point number three. Point number one is this entire concept of minding our own business goes all the way back to the start of this country.
Mm,
You look at how the British were occupying all these different places around the world,
right.
where they got their influence. I mean, for God's sakes, even Hong Kong was at one point, a British territory.
True.
Okay. And there was a cliche, if you read back on history, it went something like this: the sun never sat on the British Empire. Okay.
Yeah.
Point being is that the British controlled so much, in so many places around the world. If the sun set here, it's rising over here. So the
And it's
sun never sat on the British Empire. If I'm not mistaken, we fought an American Revolution to break free of control like that. We wanted to be independent from having some big country looming over us, sitting in our backyards, coming into our houses at will to, house our soldiers or whatever. So that was in the very founding of the country. Why in the hell are we doing it to other countries? I
right.
mean, that's pretty hypocritical there, first and foremost. Second off, you know, um, you take a look at how we've gone into all these other countries around the world. We would show our ass, like
I
I
mean,
said, if they
Iraq,
invaded us. Yeah, we've made a mess of the whole place.
right.
We've made a complete mess of it. We've destabilized, more things than we've helped. Saddam Hussein was a hideous man, brutal dictator. But the problem with them is they were also keeping groups like ISIS out, you
Right.
know. And of course, we go in, blow everything to hell, and then, create a big vacuum for more trouble to come about. Um, and my final point is, as Tulsi points out, we shouldn't be doing these things. We should, mind our own business, take care of ourselves, and let other countries, govern themselves. If they don't want an oppressive dictator, then, we had to overcome Great Britain at one point. They
Exactly.
can have a revolution if they want to. Try and
And it's
install
not
their new
like,
government the way they want it.
yeah, it's not like they can't like seek other countries' support. It's one thing to
No,
be like, look, we're supportive. Like, take the Hong Kong situation, right?
exactly.
Now, obviously, I tend to be more skeptical, and I think that the U.S. may have some hand in it. May want some to benefit in some way. But like you were saying in
Yeah,
the founding, I think even the colonies seeked foreign help in some way. Like they were,
we
I
did.
think the French, right? Like the French
Yeah,
even
we
trained
got
some of
help
our
from the
troops.
French. Yeah, we definitely got a lot of help from the French, and then I think even some. I can't remember if we got much Native American support during that war particularly or not, but I know we definitely had a lot of help coming in from the French.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's just and that's one of the things that Tulsi Gabbard really has over the other candidates is the
Yeah,
whole non-interventionist stuff. And you'll have people on the left, on the far left, kind of, why wouldn't he, I would just call them like progressives, like fake progressives, like Michael Brooks, Sam Cedar,
yeah, yeah.
TYT, Anna Kasparian, Emma Vigeland, all of these characters who go after Tulsi, and even like Abby Martin. Abby Martin, I don't know if you're familiar with her, but
I
she
am.
does some good work, like investigative journalist stuff and like
Yeah,
foreign coverage. She I think her bias kind of showed, and it's kind of showing, which I'm not gonna hold too much against her, but I've done some critical stuff against her. And my thing is
right.
like, Tulsi Gabbard has proven her record be non-interventionist. She even came out in support of Julian Assange. You know what I mean? Where some characters like Bernie
Exactly.
Sanders won't come out and fully support um, pardoning Julian Assange or like being
Mm-mm.
favorable to him for what he did, which is funny
No.
because he exposed the rigging against Bernie. So you would think if anybody had, you know, the justification to support Julian Assange, it would be Bernie Sanders.
Yeah.
Um, but with her foreign policy, the critique is, just to play devil's advocate, is, well, she's kind of for the war on terror still, like Bush's war on terror. But even during the Bush administration, um, Tulsi was on the ground. Like she was there. She has like firsthand knowledge of what happens when we extend ourselves too much and try to intervene in other countries. But
Right.
what's your take on Tulsi more specifically, and like this criticism of her being for the war on terror and like all of that?
So, as far as the war on terror is concerned, I guess it depends on how you want to define the war on terror. Are we going to go around to every country where we can, possibly draw some sort of a connection to some group and continue to wage war on them? If that's the case, no, I don't support that. But if you're looking at the war on terror as in protecting this country from something like a 9/11 ever happening again and defending our homeland without having to run into all these other countries to wage that war, well, I would support that because I mean that's really the point of the military is to protect this country. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and clearly they failed to do that on the day of 9/11, even though they had information about that in advance.
Right.
So, depending on how you want to break down when someone says, well, she supports war on terror, I'm not aware that she really wants to stay in all these other countries and keep carrying on regime change wars. Because really, if she wants to fight the war on terror, you got to look at, take Iraq, for example. They had no connection to what happened on 9/11. That was just
Right.
pure regime change war. She's not for that. So if a country did come and attack us, and then we had to retaliate out of self-defense, that's one thing. But most of the people who were involved, and this is something that Tulsi has pointed out, by the way. So here's where we're going to have I have huge support for. They claimed Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda attacked us on 9/11, right?
Mm-hmm.
So we go into Afghanistan for a little while. Within a couple of years, all of a sudden, our intelligence agencies, even though other intelligence agencies said this isn't true, our intelligence agency said, okay, Saddam Hussein's going to sell weapons of mass destruction to Al Qaeda, so we have to go in and stop Saddam Hussein. Okay?
Right.
So we enter into a war in Iraq, found no weapons of mass destruction. There was no direct link to Al Qaeda. And then what have we found out all these years later? But the fact that most of the people involved in the 9/11 attack were the damn Saudis.
Yep.
Oh, and they're our ally.
Yes. So yeah, the 9/11 families, victims of the families. I know Tulsi Gabbard has been super supportive of uncovering the documents that show whether or not officially that we had any intelligence that the Saudi Arabians were carrying this out. Let's just
Right.
ignore the fact that 15 out of the 19 hijackers were Saudi Arabian nationals. So they were from Saudi Arabia. Imagine if, you know, like any other country, their citizens were involved in some kind of plot like that.
Yeah.
We would be pointing the finger right at them saying, these are your people. These are your countrymen that came over here and carried out this attack. But for
Exactly.
some weird reason, we diverted from blaming Saudi Arabia, even though they are the number one sponsor of terrorism. If you look at it financially, they're the ones that finance this Wahhabi version
Yeah.
of Islam all across the Middle East. And we go
Exactly.
directly to Saddam Hussein, who was some fucking nobody who, had like $16 of a military budget, which makes no sense. It's like, you want to trust your country, but when the intelligence agency acts in such an irresponsible way, you kind of wonder, like, what is going on here? There has to be a bigger plot. There has to be some kind of incentives. I mean, just to kind of enter this conspiratorial rabbit hole, what do you think was the motivation for us to ignore Saudi Arabia? Like, why did we protect them and shield them?
Money. Money. There's yeah. As Jesse Ventura says, follow the money. Okay.
Right.
Um, And then that's pretty much the root of it. If you look into why we went into Iraq, and here's what I find so freaking crazy about countries like Iraq or Iran, for example, and a lot of other countries, we've poked our nose into them way back decades ago. Iran, for example, Bernie's brought this up, had a democratically elected leader. Okay.
Mm.
We in our CIA was going around to all these countries around the world trying to topple these regimes because they didn't want to do business in the way that they wanted them to do business with us, and then try and install dictators in those countries who they thought would be more favorable to, American business and big tycoons. Okay. So that's one thing that our intelligence community did a long, long, long time ago.
Yeah, it kind
Okay.
of goes back to the banana republics and stuff.
Exactly, and then that's the thing. So that's the first thing that the CIA did, and so when the intelligence community just comes out and tells somebody something, I'm hesitant whether I'm even going to believe it or not. I'm actually probably leaning toward no, I'm not going to believe it just because you say it. And mainstream media has been trying to push this narrative back about anybody who denies, something that the intelligence community said, that you're some kook and a nut.
Right. Well, like CNN got its starts in the Gulf War,
Yeah, yeah,
covering the
exactly.
Gulf
And
War and making money off that.
and here's the one thing that I want to raise. If the intelligence community was so honorable and so trustworthy, why was JFK promising to bust him into 1,000 pieces if he'd been reelected in '64?
Mm.
And of course, we know what happened to him in late '63.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Yep. Yeah, and I think that Saudi Arabia has had a deal with the United States with oil and the petrodollar, and it's
exactly.
and I think our part of the bargain was, well, we're gonna give you our military, like we'll protect you, you're kind of under our protection and stuff like that.
Right.
And you see that now because Donald Trump's and Tulsi has made comments on this too, where she's called out Donald Trump like very blatantly, calling him like Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia's bitch and shit. So it's like, whoa, like, and it's true, because, and
Yeah.
that's why I think she has a really strong shot against someone like Trump, because she'll just
Oh,
say
without a
stuff like
doubt.
that, and
Without a doubt.
it's true and it lands, because why the fuck are our soldiers guarding oil fields for the Saudis?
Yeah, and we just sold them how many arms earlier this year?
Oh, like billions of dollars worth of
Yeah.
weapons. So it's like
Yeah.
the weapons manufacturers here, and it's just to kind of get a little nuance with it. It's hard to attack that sometimes. I can see that, because if you think about it, there are jobs tied to those weapon manufacturers, unfortunately, all across the
Hmm.
country. That's why we have military bases everywhere. That's why Raytheon and all of them,
Hmm.
it's American jobs. So Trump has a leg to stand on when he says, "Hey, I'm bringing economic, resources here, because we have these jobs tied to these weapons manufacturers, and Saudi Arabia is buying. They're our customers. So why wouldn't I, benefit the taxpayer by giving them jobs and weapons?" But it's like, yeah, great, but look at the consequence to that. Like,
Exactly. You,
you
you you
know,
have to stand on principle somewhere. Even
mhm,
if they're offering you a boatload of money for those weapons, so what? You're going to sell your soul for some money?
right,
You should only be doing this to a country that's honorable and trustworthy. Someone, if let's say France or the UK wanted to buy some American arms, for example.
right.
I wouldn't have any problem with that. Japan wanted some, even though they can't have their own military. Let's just hypothetically play devil's advocate and say that if they did and they wanted some, Japan hasn't bothered us in how long? Sure, go ahead. But for someone pulling the strings that Saudi Arabia has been pulling for so long, hell no, you can't do that. I mean, okay. But if we're really going to stick with Middle Eastern countries, let's say the Kingdom of Jordan, for example. Jordan's another ally. They don't
Mhm,
bother anyone.
right.
Sure, but Saudi Arabia has been doing way too much crap behind the scenes for too long. And they're the true number one state sponsor of terror. They hack journalists into pieces. You don't sell arms like that to someone doing those things.
Yeah,
You
and there
just
was
don't.
that prince who locked up all those people in that hotel and just took
Yeah,
over. He's like, "Yep, I'm the new king." deal with it, and like his
Oh,
brother or something locked him up, or it was crazy.
do do you watch much WWE?
Yeah, I used to watch a little more, but
Are you familiar with what just happened the last time they went to Saudi Arabia?
I know that they wanted to like show the first women wrestling match or something,
Right.
and
Well, they did get that done, but they actually got stuck in the country.
whoa, why did they get stuck there?
So there's been a lot of conspiracy theory stuff floating around about the official story that they released, and the White House actually had to release a statement on this as well.
Mm.
But the official statement that came out was there was an issue with the plane, and there was just like a maintenance malfunction. I can't
Right.
remember if it was a fuel problem or what it was, but nonetheless, that was the story that they released. And they had this event, I think, on a Wednesday or a Thursday, and I'm thinking it was a Thursday actually. Yeah. And they were able to get a few people. Of course, a few people flew on private planes and got out of the country earlier. Vince McMahon being one of them, Brock Lesnar, and a couple of others.
Yeah.
But a lot of the other stars didn't get to leave. Now, some were trying to charter up their own planes to get out of the country, but the problem was
That's
SmackDown
sketchy.
taping was the very next day, and half of the people who were supposed to be there were stranded over in Saudi Arabia and couldn't leave. Now, what has come out since then from a lot of people behind the scenes in WWE was that apparently the Saudi government has supposedly been shorting Vince McMahon on pay. They had a contract with him. They were going to pay him so much money for each of these shows, and they hadn't been paying him
Oh
what he was
wow.
supposedly owed. And as a result, he pulled a broadcast feed so that the people in Saudi Arabia weren't able to watch the show properly, and it made Mr. Prince pissed. And so as a result of that, he ordered the plane be grounded and that they not be able to leave.
Jeez.
Now, whether that's true or not, that's the rumor that's been floating around. But that, as many people pointed out about the official story, if it was just a simple maintenance issue, how come they weren't able to get on other flights?
Yeah, and that's what really upsets me because we continue to salvage this relationship with Saudi Arabia
Yeah,
when all of the history and the record of how they behave and stuff like that proves contrary to why we should have a relationship with Saudi
exactly.
Arabia. In fact, in my opinion, they're the ones who are really stirring up all the chaos in the Middle East. Them and
Yeah,
the state of Israel.
they
Like
are.
say what you will about like Iran and everybody like that, but to me they're like peanut countries. Like they have like no
Yeah,
real like force. Do we really think they're gonna threaten the United States? Like, come on,
it's,
you know.
it reminds me of an old Lewis Black stand-up skit way back years ago during the Bush administration. He was talking about Bush and Cheney were talking about the axis of evil, North Korea, Iraq, and Iran.
Right.
And then he got around to Iran. And he said that they were worried that the Iranians were going to build a nuclear missile because they were getting the capabilities. And so basically his punchline was, so they're going to get this nuclear missile, and then 500 Iranians are going to throw it at us. I mean,
Right.
you know,
It's sad.
um,
Um,
until Iran attacks this country, or even if they were to try and actually launch a missile at Israel, for example, or some other country, which I
right,
mean
like an ally.
exactly. But to instigate the war, I mean, the long term repercussions. This isn't going to be like Iraq, man, because
Mm.
you got that Strait of Hormuz right there off the coast of Iran. And they tie that thing up. That's where a lot of the oil is coming from. You're going to cause such a global impact with that war. It's going to be horrendous,
Yeah, no, I
horrendous.
agree. So I mean, just to kind of bring it back to Tulsi Gabbard, her here's why I like Tulsi Gabbard is because focusing on the foreign policy situation,
Yeah.
people underestimate that so much, and it's like, no, the reason like our country is in the state that it's in is largely due to our foreign actions. Everything
Hmm.
that we're doing, not the biggest attention is the Middle East, but even in South America and some of these other countries, the way we want to like, set up this puzzle that's going to work in our favor has
Hmm.
just expanded us so much that our wage hasn't increased in 10 years.
Nope.
Our infrastructure is garbage, you know. Like if you look
Crumbling.
at Europe, if you look at even like Japan and stuff like that, like their infrastructure is great. They have like high speed rail systems. They have all kinds of like amazing airports and all of this stuff. Even China is like outdoing us in infrastructure and stuff like that. Like you go through like especially like you said like in the south or like middle of the country, just crumbling bridges,
Yeah.
rusted out buildings. It's you know what I mean?
They've
And
been
like
working on a little section of interstate right here in my hometown, I-85.
hmm,
They've had this thing under construction for probably going on 2 to 3 years now, and they're still not finished. I mean, it's moving at such a turtle pace.
yeah.
It's absolutely ridiculous. And two things I'll just want to point out real quick. One, for a country like ours, and I'm not saying that we're not a free country. We are. We just have to take it back from the people who are, pulling strings behind the scenes and corrupting it and fix our country. But for a country that's supposed to represent freedom and justice and whatnot, there was an international poll that came out a few years back, okay? And they asked people in the countries that they were polling in, they basically said, okay, if you were to end up at war with a country, and some of these countries were even like allies, I think, okay? They said, if you were to end up at war with a country, and they listed off, all these different countries, said, who do you think it would be? United States was number one in the poll by far.
Whoa.
Do you really want to be known as that country? I don't, because that doesn't sound like the country that's trying to go around, to use
Promoting
like a
democracy.
Bush-esque term here and go and give everybody some freedom juice here. That's the country that's trying to, be a bully and control
Yeah.
the whole world.
Yeah. No, yeah, I agree with you, man. And you know, the sad part about it is that if we were to just rein all that in, like kind of like how Tulsi advocates, you'd be able
Exactly.
to fix your infrastructure. You'd be able to start building up these relationships. Because I remember when Obama was elected, he went on this peace tour thing across the country,
Yep.
and the right, obviously, the opposition was hounding him and saying, "Oh, you're just being like you're making us look weak and stuff like that." Which
Yeah.
I never really. I was a conservative back then, and I never really bought that because I was like, no one's gonna think the United States is weak, my dude. We are the biggest military force. We have, all the bombs. Sorry about that. My phone went off. We
Nice, man.
have everything. So
Yeah.
no one's
And,
no
and
one's
we're
gonna
spending more on military than the next how many countries combined? And most of them are our allies.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So and that's the thing is like if we were to just kind of do that, I don't think because like part of my conservative brain is still like thinking business wise, right? Because the business folks would look at you and say, well, if we leave these countries, Russia's going to come in and take all the resources, and we need to mine those Afghanistan mountains because that's where all the minerals are, and you enjoy your iPhone, don't you? And if we leave China, you're going to have to pay $2,000 for an iPhone, and you can go on and on. You can kind of start seeing their argument of like, if we leave those regions and we give it over to the countries and give them full autonomy, well, then we don't have a manufacturing, state to fall back on, and it would just create
Well,
chaos.
that's true. I mean, if we pull out of these countries after we've gone in and made a mess, and someone like China, but here's the problem. When did China go to war with Afghanistan? Are you aware of when they went to war with Afghanistan?
Well, I know. Are you talking about Russia or China?
China.
Well, I don't even remember China going to war with Afghanistan.
They haven't, but do you know how much of the mineral rights they have in Afghanistan?
Oh yeah, but they did it smart. They went in and did deals with them, and
That's exactly my point. So if we lose out on that deal, whose fault is that? When we could have been promoting, a peaceful method, working together, doing things along those lines. Look what the Chinese did. They haven't
yeah,
had to drop one bomb in Afghanistan,
and
yet
they're
they have
outdoing
rights
us
to these
there.
things.
Yeah,
We've been wasting money tearing stuff apart, waging war, and we have squat to show for it.
man. Yeah,
So,
you're right. You bring up a really good point there. And I think that's why we're still in Afghanistan too, is because
of
we're
course,
fighting. We're fighting for that territory, that area, for that mining, for those mining, minerals and stuff like that.
Yeah. And one other thing, going back to Iraq for just a moment, I don't
Mhm.
think there's any coincidence at all that a family who was involved in the oil business and actually had ties to the bin Laden family in the oil business went into an oil rich country, Iraq, and then contracted a company, Halliburton, to come in and clean up all of our devastation. And of course, Halliburton is a company that Dick Cheney used to be the head of.
Yeah. There's yeah. I mean, if that doesn't spell out corruption and you know, what is it? War profiteering.
Yeah,
I don't know
yeah,
what is. I don't
profiteering
know
from
what is.
war.
If that's not war profiteering, I don't know what is war profiteering. You know what I mean?
No,
Um,
here's the bad part. Okay, there's a lot of people traditionally, in more times like Obama campaign, get out of all the war, stop all the interventionism. So there's a lot of push from the left to
right.
start getting out of this, or true left, I would say, not the
Hmm.
corporate, not the Clinton left.
Right.
Okay. Um, but ironically enough, it was a Republican president. You see him over here on my wall, Eisenhower, who warned us, because pre World War II, we didn't really have a big weapons manufacturing thing. We invested in that to be able to fight through World War II. And then it became like a business. We were making all this equipment. And just like any business, you make it, you got to sell it. It became a problem of we have to have, we have to do something with this stuff or else these jobs are going to go away. So he warned, if you don't keep an eye on this, you're going to have a system where it's going to just become too profitable to keep war going nonstop. And so
Right.
as a result, you better keep an eye on it or you're going to end up in nonstop wars and they're going to constantly be trying to sell this stuff to the government. And so that's why you have so many DOD contractor lobbyists. They want to
Ugh.
lobby these politicians. If there's no war, they can't use it. And when you can't involve yourself but in so many conflicts, well, now you got to sell it to other countries. And that's where they start selling their souls, going into, selling it to people like Saudi Arabia for the money.
No. Yeah, I agree. Yeah, and it's frustrating because there's like trillions of dollars that get wasted. You know what I
Oh,
mean? And if
God.
you're like a fiscal conservative who's worried about the deficit and
Yeah.
who really wants to, and there are, like I think Rand Paul is a jackass, but I think he's right on certain things. Like he's
Yeah.
right on the whole like yeah, because he'll partner with like Bernie and other people
Yeah.
when it comes to these foreign policy issues and stuff.
Yeah.
So I got to
I
give
liked
credit
his
where
dad.
credit is
I
due.
liked his dad. I'm not so much
Yeah,
a Rand Paul guy, but I
dude,
liked
I
Ron.
yeah, and I was on board with the Ron Paul 2008 campaign
Yeah.
actually. Yeah, I listened to a lot of that stuff too. I mean, he's kind of gotten. I think he's not relevant or he's just like
No.
But yeah, he back then he was definitely speaking truth for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, just to kind of keep the conversation moving. I know that we kind of touched on Tulsi Gabbard's foreign policy, so let's get into a little bit of election discussion here. So Mayor Pete has kind of become the mainstream media's new darling. So
Yeah.
just to kind of set this up, there's been a lot of footage of Mayor Pete kind of emerging. I've been
Mm-hmm.
seeing a lot of his stuff from the past, how he's kind of been very centristy and almost like I know there was a video of him like talking at the at a Tea Party convention. There was some talk of him like talking about like the birther stuff, making a joke about the
Oh,
birther
God.
stuff. Which I don't really care, but it just kind of
Yeah.
shows me that he's a fraud because he had started off in the race as like I'm kind of a Bernie Sanders type of politician, but I'm like a new generation and like I can take the
Yeah.
mantle. And then we saw
Well,
him creep slowly to the center. So, what are your thoughts on Mayor Pete?
one, I knew that's what that guy was from the get go. Most people tried to fashion themselves as some sort of a Bernie Sanders type politician because they saw what grassroots support was behind him in 2016. They knew they had to jump on that bandwagon to try and gain some support. Hillary lost. We can't try and pretend we're Hillary 2.0 here. That's a failing strategy. But the one thing that really gave it away for me, as far as how centristy he really was when he got into the healthcare plan. His whole, I want to get Medicare for all who want it, basically, if you want to just buy in. So basically, what he's advocating for is that public option type system.
Right.
Um, And while some would argue that's still better than what we have right now, it's also going to be a system with the way things are structured in this country, in my opinion. And I'm no healthcare expert, but I do have common sense.
Right.
And my prediction is it's going to fall flat on its ass. Because we've already found that the people who have pre-existing conditions and whatnot, even though Obamacare did protect them, it didn't exactly maintain a price where it says you could afford what they'd be willing to sell you with a pre-existing condition. Okay. And so as a result of that, what he's going to advocate for, if you were to try and buy in, what's going to happen, all the rich and the healthy are going to get swallowed up by the private insurance companies. They're going to cut them a good deal to keep them on board. That takes the balance out of the entire system. They're also, once they get private insurance, they don't have to pay taxes to get that Medicare for all program either, or whatever he wants to call his stuff. So they get exempt out of that program. You're going to underfund Medicare for all, and so that's going to be a huge problem. And then so basically all the poor who can't pay but so much, but are probably and sick, who are going to need the most care, that's going to be who gets swallowed up into the government program, and then it's going to cause chaos. And as a result, what's probably going to happen with that, at some point down the line, there's going to be some right-wing politician, maybe even 8, 16 years from now, however long it takes for that system to just completely become shambles,
right?
And for it to become very unpopular. And then you'll start getting the, big insurance companies who've been spending all this money the entire time, and big pharmaceutical companies. They're going to start pumping that money back into, campaign ads, campaigning against that program, and how wouldn't it be so much nicer if we just didn't have that? Everyone could just get, a health care plan, and then they'll end up just reversing sweeping that all aside. We'll be right back to square one.
Yeah, and if you think about it from an economic standpoint of view, from a health insurance standpoint, it would be like, well, let's pawn off all the sick and expensive folks on the public system.
Exactly.
And then we can, like you said, launch a campaign that says, oh, hey, conservatives and everybody, you're kind of paying twice because you're paying taxes for this public option that these very sick and poor folks are on, that you're paying for with your hard-earned money. And then you have to go and buy your health insurance plan because you're making the money. So it's easy to demonize
that's the argument. That's the argument with the Tulsi plan, because see what Pete's advocating for, they don't even have the rich, the people who get their private, they get out of paying taxes.
Right. Yep.
They don't even have to pay the taxes into it. So that's the problem. The Tulsi plan, while more poor and sick would probably still keep the government plan, even though my opinion, I don't know that there's going to be that many people, if they're getting good coverage through Medicare for all, who are going to want to just purchase on top of that, because that's where a lot of people try to criticize Tulsi on hers, saying that, she's going to create that two-tiered system. But the problem is actually hers is based off Australia's, where even if you are rich, you still pay into it. And if you want to buy on top of that, you can. Right. Well, that's going to create a funding issue. We wouldn't have to worry about funding for the program at that point. It'd be unpopular with the people who say, well, if I'm not using it, I shouldn't have to pay for it. But, in all honesty, you didn't have to buy something else either.
Exactly. So that was your choice. You still had the choice to do that. And that's what I argue with a lot of Bernie Sanders supporters about Tulsi's plan. Now, she hasn't come up with it officially, which I'm really, anxious to see what she unveils. But during the campaign trail, if you follow her along, you'll see that she's answered plenty of questions to give you an idea of what it's going to be like. And she does cite Australia as one of the biggest examples of what her plan may look like.
Exactly.
And if you think about it, it's really adaptable to the American style, the American
much more.
Exactly. It resembles our way of life here.
Because and Jimmy Dore made a good point about this the last time he had her on his broadcast over on YouTube. And that is the big talking point against the Bernie plan is that duplicative provision that says there's no private insurance company that can offer you the same thing you're going to get through Medicare for all. Whether you like it or whether you don't, this country has been based around a capitalist ideology for a very long time. You want consumer choice. You want to have more than one product out there. Now, in the thing about healthcare, I'm going to say there's pros and cons to having that choice. We can elaborate on that more if you'd like to. But the big thing is by having that talking point that he's going to take away whatever you currently have, even if what he's giving to you in exchange is better than what you have. And I believe that it would be at the end of the day, except for maybe some people who've been able to afford some, massive Cadillac plan
Right.
that pretty much covers everything they want.
Right.
For blue collar Americans, people like myself who, could end up having a big injury and putting a hole in their hand and they're afraid what their doctor bill is going to be like to go get it stitched up and have to Loctite it shut.
Right.
That happened to me earlier this year. So for people like myself, huge improvement over what we could currently get. But there's people who have plans who are going to be afraid, well, I don't like you taking away what I have.
Right.
So in other words,
and
so
the
hers
mainstream
takes that
media has done
entire,
such a good job of smearing it.
yeah, and hers takes away that talking point. If you want to keep that, you just have to pay taxes and you'll get coverage. But then if you want some other plan, by all means, and you can afford it, have at it. It's your choice.
Right. So, yeah, and I think Mayor Pete also came out and he kind of got hammered on his education stuff. So, and I like your point of view on Tulsi's single payer stuff, right? Because you're right. It does kind of take away the opposition's argument of removing that freedom of choice option because you get to layer your plan. It's kind of like Social Security is the argument I make. And you're right. Bernie Sanders' plan is probably more comprehensive and it's probably a better strategic way to go about it because you can go to the table with kind of this radical Medicare for all and it's a strong hand. So you go to the table with a strong hand. I get that. But I think that the country's so behind the idea of a healthcare plan that, Tulsi's plan I think would be kind of welcomed, It wouldn't kind of receive so much
at the end of the day,
backlash.
I got a feeling even if you went in there with Medicare for all, if you had to negotiate it down, I feel like you'd probably get something even closer to what Tulsi has anyway.
Right.
Now some might say, well, yeah, you don't start from there, you negotiate to there. So if you start from Tulsi's, you're going to actually negotiate down even further the other direction. Maybe, maybe not.
Right.
But the bigger thing though, and here's where I do think that I feel like Tulsi should kind of start closer to what Bernie has instead of what Australia has, and here's why. And Jimmy Dore made this point as well, and it's perfectly fine. Take Social Security. The rich and powerful are not collecting Social Security when they retire. You don't even pay taxes into Social Security after a certain dollar amount. How good's that program doing? I'm pretty sure it's going broke. Okay?
Yeah.
And
they
so,
chipped away at it.
Right, and that goes all the way back to Lyndon Johnson. Pretty much every president since him have tapped Social Security to take money out of it to fund one thing or the other. Mostly war, as a matter of fact.
Right,
okay?
Yeah. Take from the sick and old to fund the wars.
Exactly. And when I say war, that's the very thing Johnson tapped it for, was to fund Vietnam. Okay? And so the problem with the two-tiered system is if the rich and powerful, they're gonna if they want it and it's beneficial to them, then they buy their other plan. It becomes a government program, pretty much like Social Security or anything else. Take the VA. That's already a form of, like giving health care to the people and whatnot. And these programs that are run by the government, unfortunately, are dirt, poor, pitiful as compared to what you could be getting. And that's why, because the people in charge of running them don't really give a damn. They're not the ones being affected by it. They're just going to throw their hands up in the air and say whatever.
Yep.
But if everyone has to fall within the same system, on all these rich and politicians included, and it's going to affect the way they get treated when they go to the doctor, the wait time they have to deal with when they go to the doctor.
They're going to make sure that shit's working smooth.
You bet your ass they're going to make sure that thing runs real smooth.
Yeah, you're right. You're right about that one. The education thing with Mayor Pete. I kind of got a sense of your healthcare position, but education is a completely different beast, right? And Pete Buttigieg came out and he was saying he's so worried. His heart is just so, worried about the millionaires taking advantage of free education. Their kids, the millionaires' kids, are just gonna, bamboozle us middle class, hardworking folk. What do you make of that?
So, two things. I mean, honestly, as far as the free education thing goes, I mean, are they doing that with public schools already? I mean, you've already got, first grade through high school. Are they able to rig the system around that way? Now, some might, if you want to get deep in the weeds, say that they are. There's definitely schools within more urban communities that don't, provide a lot of the same things that you find in, high class society and in the schools in those places. So that there's definitely an imbalance. So maybe, if they provide free all the way across the board, some people are still going to get a better education for free as compared to what other people would get for free.
Right.
So from that aspect, I kind of see what he's saying, but I do think he's using a lot of fear mongering and whatnot also. Um, I'll be honest on my stance on education. I think there's a massive, massive imbalance in the education system. And I don't just mean, how a school is within the community. Take what and I think high schools are getting better about this. I don't know all across the country, but at least here they are. When I was in high school, Dorman High School, they had a school you could go to called R.D. Anderson's, like a vocational school. You could learn a trade. You could learn to weld. You could learn to work on cars. You could do law enforcement. You could take, different classes, horticulture,
Yeah, I remember
body
I was
shop
in wood
repair.
shop, and that was
Right.
awesome. Like
Yeah.
they had
And so you
programs like
can do
that. Yeah.
things like that. Now here is my hypothesis. Agree or disagree. My thing is, I think they should be focusing more on things like that, especially later on in high school. And this is going to branch over into college as well. They need to be teaching you more of an actual trade, because that's what you're going to have to apply when you get out in life. Now, you take things like even finance, personal finance, learn how to manage your money, right? When you get out in the real world.
Right.
That, if you have that class even offered in high school, it's an elective. Okay? It's an elective. Meanwhile, they make you take all these science classes, and you have to learn how to like dissect a frog. You have to have so many of those classes. You have to take algebra too, even if you never use it in the real world. You'll have to take things like this. Then you go to college. Let's say you wanted to, go to college and you wanted to, take criminal justice. They're going to require you take so many classes with that. And of course, unless you qualify for a free ride, you're going to have to pay for all those classes as well. And then how much of them would you actually use once you get out in the real world, yet you're stuck paying for them?
Right. Exactly. And
So that,
and it kind of ties into reinvigorating our infrastructure and
yeah,
kind of reinvigorating our manufacturing, because I hear this whole thing about, well, those manufacturing jobs are never coming back. I always hear that from the left. It's like, no, we got to focus in on the coding and learn how to code and this technology swooping the nation thing. And I'm like, okay, but somebody still has to build stuff. Like we still need
exactly.
there's still manufacture, like people still manufacture products. It's just not happening here. So this idea that, well, manufacturing jobs are never coming back. Okay, but those jobs are still happening. They're just not happening in this country.
No.
So and if you think about it, those white collar jobs or whatever they call them, those are
Yep.
also being outsourced to India
Mm-hmm.
and to
Mm-hmm.
China. So they could make the same argument there. Oh, well, those jobs are never coming back. So then we're left with zero jobs. So what do you make of that whole idea of like manufacturing jobs will never come back to America? Because I know Trump ran on that, and that was a really successful thing because it ties
Yeah.
into like Americans just want to have like a secure job, something that they can.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, here's where it gets, a little gray. They'll come back. They just may not be the same when they come back. So, for example, take textile, for example, because that's one that really hit a lot, in the South.
Right.
South was big on their textile industry. I had a lot of family members, I remember when I was growing up, that had worked throughout cotton mills in the South throughout their life, okay? And they started just closing up one right after the other as I was growing up. I mean, it was like dominoes, okay? And apparently they had already been on a downward spiral for quite some years before that.
Right.
If a job like that come back, it's not going to be a job that, say, my aunt who worked that kind of job back then would probably even qualify for today. It's going to be much more computer related. There's probably a lot of equipment she has no experience with whatsoever. She
Right.
wouldn't be able to do it today. So it might come back, but it's not gonna take a lot of those people who may have lost their jobs sometime in the past and say, okay, yeah, we're going to hire you for this job. They're going to say you're not qualified for it, because the world has changed so much since those jobs left. Technology's come a long way. And so that's really going to make it harder on those people to get the job. So that's one thing, even when Trump made those promises, no one was taken into consideration. They just thought, oh, he's going to bring the job back and I'm going to qualify for it. What you've actually found is in a lot of these manufacturing jobs that have came back or opened up since the Trump presidency, they're actually having a hard time finding people qualified enough to work those jobs. And the problem is,
Which
even when
ties
you
back
take
to the vocational stuff.
exactly, so you need to be training people to do these things late in high school, in college, or whatever, and don't add all the extra strings onto it.
Yeah,
You,
because you
you
hear
know,
a lot of people, the argument is, well, I don't want some hippie guy going in and getting some liberal arts degree that's not going to contribute to the economy. That's the argument
right.
from opposition.
Well, and to be fair, I mean, and that's what that's really my thing with the whole free education. Not to say that now, as far as the debt forgiveness goes, I'd be behind that 100%. Free education, I think we should make like general public colleges definitely more free,
Right.
if it's going to be required, if that's feasible. But the big thing is, at some point we have to start holding people accountable for their responsibility. And if you want to chase that as your dream, you want that liberal arts degree, by all means, you should be able to go for it. I mean, do what you want to do. And I think that if the system was more reformed and you didn't have to take a lot of classes that didn't pertain to what you were actually wanting to pursue, it would become one, more affordable, and two, if we actually had more money within the government, instead of wasting it on all these wars, all that money could then be redistributed through all these different methods, whether it be infrastructure, the healthcare, or adding more government funding to help someone go to college for that. But that, yeah, to go for something, you have to look at what the job market demands.
Right.
And if you're really wanting that free ride through college, it really should be something that you're going to be able to go out and get a job. But if you're just wanting to chase something that's your passion, then there's hardly no job market for it. It becomes hard from a financial standpoint to argue why a tax, a lot of tax money anyway, should just be going to pay for all that. But I think if you reform the system, you would actually find that that's going to bring the cost of getting that degree down by a lot, because there's not all the extra crap tacked into your bill at the end of the day.
Yeah, and
Um,
that's one of the biggest problems right now is that these public, I use that in quotations because really it's only like 20-30% publicly funded.
yeah,
they keep cutting it so that these universities have to go whore themselves out to, foundations and different things like that to
yeah,
keep the building, like adding new buildings and stuff like that. So they transfer the cost over to the student. So that's why these educations are so expensive. And these students, I mean, they're 18, 19 years old, right? What the fuck do they know? They're going to sign these things and they're going to get into debt. And then,
yeah,
and then if that happens in a grand scale like it is, you're going to have an economic problem that's going to affect you. And by you, I mean whoever that might be, like the mechanic who owns his own shop, who is very
exactly,
conservative, cares about his family,
exactly.
and doesn't want to be responsible for anybody else. Okay, great. But when those 19, 20-year-old dumbasses can't afford to take their cars to your shop, guess what?
Nope.
That starts hurting you.
Exactly.
But
Exactly. And so that's why, because of the issue that has been caused by the bad system, whether it be we're talking healthcare or whether it be the education system, I'm completely behind the debt forgiveness on both of those, like Bernie
yeah, go ahead and
proposing.
expand on that a little bit because I know that there's some pushback against, forgiving these people's loans.
Right. Well, I look at it like this: if we could bail out Wall Street, we could bail out the people.
Mm.
It's just that simple. If you can bail out your rich donors, who I'm sure if they had pooled their money together and tried to spend some of their own dime, they'd have been able to take care of their problem to some degree anyway. But did they want to do that? No. Federal government comes in. Goldman Sachs, Obama's biggest campaign contributor, when they came calling and needed his help, he was there to help them real quick, like.
Yes,
Okay,
sir.
but
Yeah,
yet he
like
couldn't
yes,
even get
sir.
us the
Yes, sir.
public option.
Right. Yeah.
So,
Oof. Yeah. That
you know,
2008 thing. I mean, they kicked out millions of people from their homes,
yeah,
and nobody
yeah,
went to jail. And yeah, man,
and
it's sad. That really kind of hurt the economy, big time.
oh, no doubt it did. I mean, the economy was already in a bad way going up to that, but that was just icing on the cake.
Yeah, and that's why
Uh,
like the same thing you were talking about, Mayor Pete. how you saw that from the get-go, where he was like this sneaky, conniving politician who you could
Yep.
smell the fakeness of him. That's
Yep.
how I felt in '08 and in 2012 with Barack Obama. I looked at him, man, and I said, this guy is such a phony. He's such a phony. And when the whole crash came happening and the banks got bailed out, and then he bailed out GM, right? They literally bought all this. They bought the company and then handed it back over to GM.
Yeah, with no strings attached.
Exactly. After they, the taxpayer put the hard work in to revive GM.
And you know what?
Now they're
If
moving
I'm not
overseas.
mistaken, when they sold those stocks, they lost money.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
No profit made.
That's beautiful. I mean, that's absolutely beautiful. But one quick point, since we were talking about the education, the jobs thing, as you said, we got to get the vocational stuff up, even if it's software, computer wise, or hardware, building the equipment wise. The problem that you've got is, especially in the computer industry, a lot of those tech jobs, they got outsourced as well. The problem is there's a massive hole in this country, and it is free trade deals.
Right.
Me and you were talking pre-show a little bit about that. Ross Perot was the sole maverick in 1992, the last independent that made a regular debate stage in the general election. And at one point, he was actually polling higher than Clinton and Bush, but for some reason he dropped out, if I'm not mistaken, back in '92, and then jumped back in, and that really tanked his numbers. I think people just like, okay, what are you doing, man? So that really tanked his numbers, dropped his poll numbers real bad. But he was campaigning against that whole thing, saying that it's going to actually hurt, the American worker and the American jobs. And you had people like Bush at the time saying, oh, no, it's going to help because we can now sell the products made in this country, to other countries, and we don't have to pay tariff taxes at the border. Well, it's a two-way street. Anything made there is going to come over here tariff tax free as well.
Right.
Now, when you compare the standard of work in Mexico, especially back in the 90s, as compared to what you've got, in the United States.
Yeah, man, that all the union people worked hard to implement here.
Exactly. I mean, the unions really built a good system up in this country to protect the American worker. They don't have those things in Mexico. And Perot pointed out, he said, look, you're not going to have benefits. You're not going to have OSHA regulation, EPA regulation. You're going to pay a fraction of the labor cost. And so what's going to happen is all these, entrepreneurs following that, capitalist ideology are going to say, okay,
and this is coming from one of their own
over here. Exactly, because what are people to a lot of these rich pricks anyway? They're a statistic, they're a worker ant, and they're just a number. If you go into the street, it doesn't bother them. They're going to go have, a big steak dinner that night one way or the other. So they could give a crap less.
Right.
So their main thing is just make profit, make money, and this is going to produce much more profit and much more money. And so you have to go back to an old FDR Democrat style of thinking in the economy. You have to exercise protectionism.
Right.
Now, unfortunately, and this is what I tell a lot of people about that, one thing I will praise President Trump on is trying to use tariff taxes. Now, whether he's using them the right way or not, we can debate that.
Right.
But the system of using those tariff taxes to try and level that playing field back out so we can eliminate some of those trade deficits and start, making it so it's, cheaper for a lot of these entrepreneurs to actually keep their job here, open it up here, because what they found out was I can go make it there and then ship it back to this country and sell it cheaper on the market here than I can to just make it here in the first place.
Yeah, even despite all the, fees that go into bringing it over here, for the businesses, It's still worth it.
It's still so much cheaper because of all the other factors that you've eliminated from that entire process. But the problem is the media, of course, being funded by a lot of these rich people who don't want a system like that to ever happen again. They like this lopsided system. They're making a lot of profit off of it.
Right.
And the media smears him as in like it's a bad thing, especially a lot of Republicans. Oh, man, they were trying to nail him to the wall.
And so correct me if I'm mistaken, but at the time, the whole debate was NAFTA, right? Like
Yeah,
trade
yeah,
relations between Mexico and Canada.
yeah. And then that's correct. And a lot of people I've heard a lot of blue collar people in the South say that it's Bill Clinton's fault about NAFTA. Well, that's true. Bill Clinton was the president when NAFTA was passed. But if you go back and you listen to the 1992 debate, H.W. Bush was the one up there championing this whole thing. Bill Clinton was just kind of silent on the issue. Ross Perot was the one saying, yeah, this is horrible. It's going to hurt the country. It's going to wreck the economy. It's going to cost a lot of jobs. And H.W. Bush was up there. This is going to be the best thing since sliced bread. And you know what? I don't want to stop here. I want one with Chile. I want one with Europe. I want one here. I want one there. So he
And
wanted
it's
to take
kind
the
of a
ball.
legacy of Reaganomics and all of that,
Exactly.
right? Deregulation.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah. So yeah,
So
I mean, and Clinton, it really, this was happening at the time when this whole new Democrat thing, I sometimes side with Republicans, and that was all of Clinton's whole spiel that got him
right.
elected. And some people even say like the only way NAFTA could have gotten passed was with a Democrat, and that kind of was the role that Bill Clinton played. But it's
Yep.
astonishing how the billionaire in the race was the one at the time sounding the alarm, saying, "Look, I come from these people. Like this is my, my group, my class, and I'm telling you, I'm warning you of what they're gonna do
Hmm.
with this, because it only makes sense, like you said, to, cross over to the other side and
Exactly.
benefit
Exactly.
and reap the rewards from all of that."
And and so I think real quick where a
Yeah,
lot of the narrative against Trump is sticking is because if people right now, as we've discussed, wages haven't gone up. A lot of people still aren't living as comfortably as they were decades ago, as far as the middle class is concerned. And so with Trump implementing these tariffs, if you see the price of something go up, you're going to go, oh no 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 no, I don't like that. I don't like that. What's this man doing?
right.
Take my brother-in-law, for example. He worked at Spartanburg Steel. Trump's trying to, make it so that you have to buy more American steel instead of cheap Chinese steel. Just had massive layoffs at the plant. They've been losing contracts. So it's causing a lot of instability. And so people think, well, what he's doing isn't working and isn't going to work. Well, that's false. The problem is you have to plug the hole, and there's been such a mess created by this. You can't fix it without making things look like they're going to be worse and then actually possibly even get worse. And so that's where you really need the government to be spending their money back into the people, whether it be creating jobs with the infrastructure, fixing our infrastructure, things like that. Some sort of a new deal that can, help provide better income for the American workers. You've got to support them through that tough time. And Trump's actually been trying to do that with the farmers. And of course, a lot of farmers bash him and say, "Hey, I'd rather be, selling my cattle than taking your money." Well, true, but again, you have to ride the storm out. The Dark Knight line, for example,
Mm-hmm.
the night's darkest just before the dawn.
Right.
That's what people are going to see in the process of trying to fix that mess. But
And you're
it's
right that
not
he gets a
just
lot of credit for the tariff thing, because, and that's one. Yeah, I do give him credit for that. Now, obviously, I don't feel like he's doing it the right way, but
no,
tariffs are such a complicated thing, and trade wars are always,
exactly,
they always,
exactly,
it's always a bad thing. But I think that it's one of those band-aids needs to be ripped off situations with
yeah,
China, where it's like we need to push back against China, because they're right at our heels. They're clipping at our heels, because we fell into that relationship of them being the producers of everything. And when we gave them that power, essentially we gave them that power. Like, the reason that
yeah.
China is where it is right now is because they were smart enough to make that deal with all these countries around the world to say, bring it here, baby, bring it here.
Yeah.
We'll
Well,
do it for,
and the
we'll,
best analogy that I could probably make for this entire example is take this glass, okay?
Mhm.
Is it a lot easier for me to bust this glass or to take those pieces and take it piece by piece and put it back together again and glue it and make a glass again? Which one's easier?
breaking the glass.
It's a lot easier to make a mess with your economy and your trade deals than it is to try and fix it, because once you give those countries the upper hand and then you come back later on, especially to someone like China, who we owe our ass to because of all the money we've been spending on, things that didn't actually contribute back to society, for example.
Yeah.
Um,
It's
You can't exactly go to the table and say, oh, I don't want that no more. They're going to say, well, screw you. We're benefiting from this and we want to keep it.
Right. They have, in my opinion, they kind of have an upper hand. Now, Trump's in a tough position because if he
Yeah.
backs out, it shows his weakness. So he can't
Bingo.
really back out. But if he doesn't back out, it's going to hurt economically. One way or another, it's going to hurt something. And that's
Oh,
going to
yeah.
go against him in the election next year.
Yeah.
'Cause it's all
Yeah.
going to pop off next year.
Oh, yeah.
So he's
Definitely.
got to ride that storm and hope that he makes it, and he can
Well,
kind of show.
and again, that's why he should be pushing a better policy, not just doing one part of it, do both parts of it.
Right.
Help your people get through that situation. Be the leader that says this is what we're trying to do. This is what's going to happen. So as a result, instead of me upping a military budget to go wage more war, we need to invest more of that money back into helping you through this time. Pass a universal basic income like Andrew Yang's proposed, for example. Things like that will help the people, the blue collar, make it through that tough time. And who do you think is going to push that issue of if they got on a debate stage with Trump? Because I don't think he's going to say that in 2020. So they're going to push I want out of the wars, and this is what I want to do for the people. Who's pushing the best message like that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely true.
Yeah.
So okay, so just to switch gears here a little bit, I know that one of the biggest things when it comes to foreign policy is the Patriot Act that we passed after 9/11. There was some recent news, and I know I know you've been researching this about the Patriot Act being reinstated, or kind of tell us more about that, because like I read up into it, but yeah.
Yeah.
And this was Pelosi and the Democrats.
Yep. There was only a few Democrats who came out and voted against it. AOC being one of those, but they slipped it in underneath the radar when no one was looking. So the last debate that we had, I'm pretty sure they did this either a day or maybe 2 days for the debate, because I made a video about it literally the day of the last debate. And there were a couple people who commented and said, well, maybe they'll address this in the debate. Yeah, I didn't hear a peep about it in the debate.
Of course not. Yeah, you know how those debates are.
No. They kept this very low key, very under the radar, because they know that the people are not going to like it. When the people found out from Edward Snowden what the NSA and whatnot was doing behind the scenes, they were outraged. They were outraged about it, and rightfully so. And so this is where, when a lot of people, especially more onto the left, take the tone of, I want the government to protect me. I want the government to protect me. And that's a big argument, even branching over into the Second Amendment, about how should we handle the issue of guns. My problem with this government trying to protect me is they don't do it in the first place. Even with the Patriot Act that allows them to basically violate your Fourth Amendment rights, spy on you and everything else, the NSA doing what they did and probably are still doing, just, supposedly quit a lot of this stuff. But, I mean, do you really believe that they have?
No.
The problem is, even with all the things that they're doing today, people still end up on watch lists, and then they're not stopped before they go and carry out some mass act. Take the Orlando nightclub shooter.
Right, he was on the watch list, and he still was able to.
And his dad, I think, was even on a watch list.
Right. So
and
even
so
when
this guy didn't
are
get
in
stopped.
place, yeah.
And so that's why one thing I make mention of a lot in my videos is people tend to just, out of fear, think that if we give up our rights for the government will then in exchange protect us and keep us safe.
That's what taxes are for.
Yeah. So the problem with that entire ideology is that they're just simply they're not doing it. So
and that's their job. Like, their whole job is to do that anyways. Why do they need a Patriot Act to why do they need more powers other than, hey, we elected your ass, we pay taxes.
Exactly.
And you're supposed to represent us, and it's a republic. It's not even a democracy. So,
Bingo.
Exactly. So, like, this whole federal oversight of these like agencies, it's kind of sketchy already to begin with, because, I mean, in a way, they're kind of infringing on states' rights.
Oh, definitely. And one thing that I tell a lot of people is that look at it like this is actually an old Benjamin Franklin quote. Anyone who would sacrifice their freedom for their safety shall have and they deserve neither.
Right.
In other words, if you give up your rights for someone to keep you safe, you're not going to be safe and you're not going to be free. And you don't deserve it either because you gave up your freedom.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's funny because, like you said, a lot of the far left and stuff like that, they get into that contradiction. Take like people like David Pakman, Sam Cedar, Ty, all these people, right? They're quick to be the intellectuals and the smarty pants in the rooms that,
Yeah.
well, with the whole gun law situation or everything else, and it's like, well, you guys make the argument about like freedom of choice and everything like that with certain things, right? Like abortion
Yeah.
and things like that, civil
Yeah.
or what do you call it, like social issues and stuff
Social
like that,
issues.
right?
Yeah.
Because we know
Yeah.
conservatives, more of the right leaning people, they're more hard asses on the social issues.
Yeah.
I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah.
But like you were mentioning, like they're quick to like infringe on economic rights and like freedom, like with especially with the Second Amendment, right? And that's my biggest strife is like, if you do anything with gun laws, the intelligence agencies and the deep state are going to take advantage of that because you're basically handing them new tools and new goodies for them
Yep.
to like be able to wrap their hands around and manipulate in a way that you
Yep.
never expected because
Yep.
your thoughts were, your original concept was, well, this is to protect everybody. You're
Yep.
handing the government, the same people
Yeah.
you guys call out of rigging all of this, and especially David Pakman, with the Russia Gate and all of this stuff, you're handing them better, and they say, oh, well, we also have to reform the government at the same time. And it's like, it's kind of
So
a gaggle fuck. Like,
the government is corrupt. They do all these things. They rig politics so that people don't actually get what they want. Yet I'm going to turn over my way of protecting myself to you, and you're going to now be honest.
right,
That's some logic at its finest.
right, yeah,
And
exactly,
really, the big thing with people like Pacman and even TYT, I'll talk about two clips from each of those. Okay, just real quick here. So I was watching a video, and I actually made a video about David Pacman the other day. He's big, saying Tulsi's got no chance. She needs to just drop out, be done with it. And basically, I took some of his old clips and spliced them in
yeah,
on the predictions that he made in 2016 about how, and this was election day, and he said Michigan, even though both people have been campaigning, Clinton's going to take Michigan decisively. Trump won
right,
Michigan. Wisconsin's in Clinton's base. She's definitely got that. He won Wisconsin. No Republicans won Pennsylvania in a long time. I don't think Trump's going to be the first. He got Pennsylvania.
right,
I think Clinton's going to take Florida. Boom, he gets Florida. I have a suspicion she's going to get North Carolina. Bang, he took North Carolina. I mean, really?
yeah,
So you were off. He predicted, his final prediction was that Clinton was going to come out 322 electoral votes, right? She got what was it?
like
232
yeah,
electoral
232.
votes. Yeah. He was off by 90 electoral votes. And yet he was bragging in that very clip about how in 2012 he was 100% right.
Yeah,
So like, oh yeah,
and he pushed Russiagate. That's my biggest pet peeve
yeah.
with David Pakman, especially. Like, I would love to have a debate with the guy,
Oh,
because
me
what
and you
he
both,
does,
man.
look, he does a lot of this gish galloping,
Yes.
and then
Yes.
what's funny is that with his callers, he'll, people will call in, and there's, it's not just him. There's a lot of people on, like TYT, like you said, Anna Kasparian. She just sat down with Margaret Thatcher or whatever, the Secretary of State for the Clintons, and she said all kinds of fucking, despicable things and interventionist things. But like, just to stick on Pakman for a second, he
Yeah.
does this gish galloping stuff, and he also he will try to deflect and move the conversation to something he knows he can win on. So,
Oh
and a
yeah,
lot of his callers fall
definitely.
for it, right? Like, they'll make really good points, and then, he'll do his sneaky tactful thing where he'll like focus in on one little thing they said or something and
Yep.
ignore the larger point that they're trying to make. And to
Yeah.
me, that's just not gaslighting, but it's dishonest and disingenuous.
Well,
And I
to
don't
me,
like
a
characters
lot
like
of a
that.
lot of people have done that. You want a good example? Even though this clip turned into a complete fiasco, go watch Piers Morgan debate Alex Jones on the Second Amendment years ago on CNN.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Now, and I'm no Alex Jones fan,
Right.
God no, but he did make a point in there saying that while the gun crime throughout Europe was much lower, their violent crime was still fairly high compared, to a lot of other countries. So, for example, the country that actually has the least amount of crime in Europe is Switzerland. They are also the most gun-friendly country in Europe, and they train people responsibly at a young age. Now, I'm not advocating. Matter of fact, I think like every grown man, because you have to serve 2 years in the military there, and so
You
I think
get
pretty
gun
much all of them
training
have
right
guns.
there.
Right, but you don't. The good news about serving in their military is they hadn't been in a war since before, like World War II. That's why the Geneva Convention. You
Was
see what I'm
yeah,
saying?
yeah,
They're pretty much the country of peace. So
yeah,
you don't have to worry about going into a war if you're in their military. But
right,
the point that he made was, that there's still a lot of crime, and so even though he's making these points, Piers Morgan just keeps talking over him, saying, "Oh well, no, there was so many thousand, gun deaths here, and there was only, I think he said like 22 or something like that,
right,
But you're not taking into consideration all the violent crime still that's on top of that either.
right. And
Um,
that's another fault of the left, and
yeah,
this neoliberal like approach is like you
yep,
said, Pierce Morgan trying to talk over him, trying to address every
yes,
single thing Alex Jones is trying to say, and
yep,
David Pakman does the same thing,
oh
and you're
yeah,
already losing. You're already a loser in everybody's perspective, at least every common sense American, because I forget what the term is, but it's like it's a very like elitist thing to try to do because Alex Jones or whoever you're debating is already throwing like 8 or 9 points at you. So you're trying to start from point one and trying to, well,
and
let's
just keep
dismiss
hounding it.
this, let's dismiss this one, and it's
Yeah,
like to me, you're already, even though you might be right on certain things, you already lost the conversation. The best way to do
exactly,
it is let the person lay out his argument or her argument, and then address it like, okay, how do you make the world look the way you want it to look? So if you're telling me that we shouldn't blame the guns, blah blah blah, what is your solution? Try to put the ball
exactly,
in his field and say, I want to hear I'm here to listen. I'm here to listen to you. I'm here to see what your solutions are. And then we are now debating about your solution or the solution instead of the problem. Because if you just
exactly.
debating the problem and all of that, people are just,
Yeah,
why am I even
spending all
listening
your
to this?
time
You guys are
debating the
just,
problem and coming up with no,
exactly.
solution gets you nowhere.
So for
Um,
example, like the gun situation that we were talking
yep,
about, right?
yep,
In my opinion, I think every American is sensible, and I think that gun regulation is one thing.
yeah.
Now you had like that ridiculous Beto O'Rourke guy who went on the
Oh God,
debates and
yeah.
was
We're
like,
we're,
yeah,
we're
yeah,
gonna
he was
come
like,
around and take them.
yeah, we're gonna come around and take them and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And that's
yeah.
just like, I mean, the
Of
guy
course,
had
and
balls to
that's
say
after he
that. You got
promised.
to say, but it's
Yeah,
just the worst possible thing you could have done, because the
yeah,
polls are in your favor for regulation, right? The
yeah.
people are
Definitely.
for sensible regulation. Now it's
Yeah,
just about figuring out where that regulation line is, right? Like right
yeah.
now we have these universal background checks that
Yep,
are like
yep.
lickety split. You walk into the gun shop and you're out of there. There's no like there's not it depends on what state. Like every state is different, but
Right.
um
Well, but then the other issues, you got the gun show loophole too, where you don't even have
right.
that.
Yeah. Yeah, where you
Yeah,
can just go around it and do that. So you could look at Alex Jones or someone like that and say, okay, so the crime rates are still high. So there's still violence, right?
hmm,
When you add the guns to it, that's going to exacerbate the situation. So, Mr. Alex Jones or whoever, how do we go about fixing that problem? Because more guns doesn't seem to solve the solution. We are the biggest gun, holder country in the world. We have
and the
like
country's
it out
also the biggest arms dealer in the world too.
right. So we have all the guns. We have
Oh
like
yeah,
we have more guns than there are people in the country. So more guns obviously, I mean, do you want more than that? Like, how much more guns can you have? Because a lot of their argument is, well, you got to have good people with guns, outnumber the bad people with guns. It's like we
yep,
already are in that situation. The solution that you advocate for is already being implemented in the country, and there's still violence. So what
Right.
do you do to fix that? And you know, a big part of that is mental health, because they always point, well, mental health, mental health, mental health. Okay, so then you are
Yep.
advocating for free health care, right? Because that is one
Hmm.
solution to the problem.
Yep.
You know, comprehensive care that includes mental health, where people are
Yep.
being checked out and, you know, given the necessary medication or the necessary, you know, attention that they need to remedy their problems.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
I mean, it's all a balance of. Would you agree? It's all a balance of like freedom and rights. Like you're sacrificing a certain thing. Because I had a conversation with this conservative friend of mine who's like, "Look, that's the price you pay for freedom," and it's kind of fucked up to say because you know all these kids are dying in high schools and stuff like that. So it kind of gives you that. And I see the emotional like and moral aspect of the left, but I can also sympathize with the right and say I I kind of like my civil liberties. Like I don't want you know the government infringing on civil liberties. And Tulsi's a big advocate of civil liberties, but it's a fine line, and I think it's such a nuanced discussion.
It is, and it's really it's the answer is in the gray. It's not in the white, and it's not in the black. It's not a white or black issue here. You know, there's a mix that you have to look at in the actual answer, and that is it's not an issue of it's a societal issue. It's the
Yeah.
way people have become in today's society. A long time ago, it was a lot more common for people at a younger age to have guns, especially down here in the South.
Right.
You know, there's even rumors going back to World War II that one of the biggest reasons that the Japanese didn't want to attack us in our actual homeland, they hit Pearl Harbor, but they never tried to invade, is there was a gun behind every blade of grass.
Right.
You know, that it's a mentality thing. People aren't responsible with a firearm anymore, and so you can't just give someone a gun. Guns aren't for everyone. People are going to be stupid with them if you let stupid people get a hold of guns. You
Right.
can't have something like that going on. And there's a societal issue where there needs to be a emphasis on more training, being more responsible, and the mental health thing definitely.
Yeah.
That is a huge factor into that argument. But
Yeah.
real quick before we move on,
Hmm.
touching back just briefly on Pac-Man and TYT for a moment.
Yeah. You know, I
Um,
always love talking about Pac-Man and TYC.
whoo, whoo. Um, I think that their big issue is they go along to get along, as I say, you know, down
Hmm.
here in South Carolina. Um, for example, they want to take TYT. They wanted Bernie Sanders. I think Pac-Man's supposed to be a Bernie supporter and all that too. Two things I've seen in their videos. Okay, we'll just start with Pac-Man because his was the shortest. Now he wants Bernie, right? But yet
Yeah.
he come out and said basically that he would take Michael Bloomberg over Donald Trump.
He
Okay,
recently
now
said that.
yeah, he made a video back in November before Bloomberg officially announced when Bloomberg was floating the concept that he might run. He would said that he would definitely take Bloomberg over Donald Trump. And
Wow.
his reasoning why is because Bloomberg supposedly had much better policy. Bloomberg was, you know, a better man. He was more statesman-like than Donald Trump was. Let me tell you something. When the country's falling apart, I don't give a rat's ass if you walk around, you know, with a nice suit and tie, carrying yourself like some high class citizen.
Right.
No,
Right.
screw that crap. I want somebody that's going to get something done.
We're
I
way
don't care if
past
he
that.
talks like Joe from the trailer park. If he gets the country fixed, go at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Exactly. Yeah.
Um,
That's crazy, man. And you know what? Like TYT, as we all know, got an investment of $20 million from I forget who, but like you know these
Buddy
sketchy
Romer, I
people,
think.
right? Yeah. And you know I've gotten into some Twitter arguments where people are like, well, it's different. Like money in politics is different from business and investing money. And I'm like, it's all one big circle, my dude. You know, it's a media company, TYT. They have influence in politics because they cover politics. So an
Yeah.
infusion of $20 million into that media company is no different than what CNN and MSNBC do. They push
Oh no.
propaganda and it's manufactured consent no matter how you slice it. And ever since they got that infusion, they've shifted their political view to, like you said, a more go along, get along thing with the mainstream media.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Because,
definitely.
yeah,
And
they
it
pushed
kills me if
Russiagate and
if
all
you
that.
want to see the hypocrisy. Go back and watch those compilation videos of 2016 on election night. They come in, they're kissing Hillary's ass up one cheek and down the other.
It's going to be a
Okay.
landslide. They're
Yeah, and
cheering
all these people
on.
talking about how great it is, and Trump has buried himself. You know, the tape that leaked out, the Billy Bush thing or whatever, grab him by the okay, you know that whole thing. They're like, oh, he's done.
Yeah.
Okay, and they're just like Pac-Man that night. Now, here's why again I say I'm not ruling Tulsi out yet, and I disagree with people who think that we should, because they were relying on what source of information to tell them Hillary is going to kick ass in this election.
The
Polls.
mainstream, yeah, and the mainstream media pushes those polls.
Exactly. But the polls were dead wrong.
Yeah,
And
it's
they
because
all
they
looked
go off
really,
data.
really
They
dumb the
go,
very next day.
yeah, and they go
And,
off data that like of potential voters from last year and all. They don't
yeah,
account for like new voters or the new blood that these new candidates are
no,
pumping in.
no.
They
And
don't
they're
account
only
for any of
polling
that.
at age brackets too.
Yeah,
A lot of these
exactly.
people are like 40s, 50s,
hmm That's why
you know?
When Bernie started upsetting all these states and like pushing victories and stuff like that in New Hampshire and stuff like that, they were like,
Yep.
"Whoa, like what is going on here?" And he turned
Mhm.
that whole place upside down. And
Mhm.
just to go back to TYT, like you mean to tell me like if you get $20 million from these elites and stuff like that who have their own agendas, who have their own businesses that they rely on to make profits that are tied into some kind of political arrangement, that they're not
Right.
going to look at TYT and say, hey, don't push that narrative. It affects our bottom line. We have
Exactly.
business connections there. We
Exactly.
have, with these people or that people. And,
Well,
what's
and
sad is that
and
Cenk was the money out of politics guy.
yeah, and proof of that, for example, is take a look at what the big scandal that just came out on from Project Veritas they exposed on ABC not too long ago.
Yeah, with
The
the
whole
Epstein.
issue, yeah, the Epstein cover up.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. So I mean that's exactly what's going to happen there. But then you follow that clip like I mentioned earlier, where they were coming in praising Hillary. Hillary's going to win, and then at the end of the night, when Trump's taking off with the race, oh man, Jank got furious. Oh, we're at war with the DNC. We're at war with. Okay, man. So you buddied up to this woman. You knew she was a flawed candidate, clearly. You're sitting here talking about how horrible of a candidate she was now. You knew they were trying to screw Bernie Sanders in favor of her, and you still buddied up to that anyway instead of taking a principled stance and saying, yeah, I'm not backing that corporate heifer, you know?
Right, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
So,
and Bernie kind of did the same thing. He,
yeah,
after the all of the knowledge we found out about what they did to him, he still went out there and camped. Now you could see that he was kind of, you know, annoyed by it. He didn't really want to, but he
yeah.
still like, and I get the whole like, well, we wanted to beat Trump or whatever, but he had to know Hillary wasn't going to beat Trump.
Off of the whole talking points alone and a lot of the comments that Donald Trump made, my opinion is if anyone truly thinks that Hillary Clinton would have been a night and day difference as far as foreign policy, economic policy, or anything in regards to Donald Trump, if anything, I feel like you'd have all the negatives and none of the benefits. He was push trade deals. Now you could say that Trump pretty much went back later on and then kind of put most of that into play himself.
Yeah.
But at least like the tariff thing, for example, you wouldn't have gotten any of that underneath Clinton.
No.
No, I don't
No.
even think a lot of people try to give Trump crap for meeting with Kim over in North Korea.
Yeah.
Hey, the way of peace is always the way to go. As long as you don't sell the farm to get there and try to give him everything in the book, just to
It's
try and
like,
have a sit down with him.
and then
That
you
you
see
know,
that in this 2020 election with Kamala Harris and Pete, how the whole exchange
yep,
between Tulsi and Pete, where he was calling her out for meeting with Assad when we know Pelosi has met with Assad. We know other characters have met with Assad, and she's on the Foreign Relations Committee. She's on all these foreign policy committees. Their
yeah,
whole job is to have oversight on the executive branch. So why wouldn't they go to Syria when the executive branch wants to go to war in Syria and look for themselves and say, I'm on this committee that the American people rely on me for oversight. So let me go check out what's going on over there myself so that I can be better informed to make a better decision.
and that's what kills me is
And then
from
they
that
say,
side
"Oh,
of the
you met with
aisle.
these people."
No, when they push the narrative that Tulsi is an agent, we'll say Russia, because that's been the big one. They keep hitting her with the side, but they keep saying she's a Russian agent, for example, right?
Right.
Okay, which candidate is supporting going to paper ballots and not dealing with these computers? Because a lot of these election machines, Jimmy Dore did a piece on this a while back.
Right.
They did a mock setup, and they got basically they copied the software off those election booth computer voting machines. There were 11-year-olds able to hack into these things.
Yeah.
11-year-olds. and who is pushing the concept of going back to a paper ballot? Tulsi Gabbard, the Russian agent.
Right,
Are you
supposedly.
kidding me? Yeah. Well, I'm not saying she's a Russian agent here. I'm saying,
That's what they claim
with
that
their,
she is, yeah.
Yes, they're claiming she's the Russian agent, yet she's pushing the one thing that would actually help prevent any Russian interference like they claim happened in 2016. Okay? So that doesn't make much sense.
What's funny is that they also claim Trump is a Russian agent when he kept up the sanctions on Russia. And if you look at everything he's done with Russia, if anything, he's escalating with Russia.
And who told Russia that we're going to give you a reset button? Hillary Clinton. Right. Who told the I forget what position that guy was, but going up to the 2012 election, you got that hot mic clip of Obama basically telling that Russian official, when they thought they were off camera, wait till after the election and I can work with you better.
Right, yeah, because he was telling Mitt Romney, like, oh, the old Soviet Union thing, like you're pushing that whole thing, and we're past that. And it's funny because, like, what do those people who push the Tulsi as a Russian agent, what is their ultimate goal? Like, what is their, like, end game? Is it war with Russia? Like, do they want, like Trump to just be so hawkish against Russia that we go to war with these fuckers? Like, I don't understand, and then, like, Pete Buttigieg on stage on the last debate saying, oh, well, like Trump meeting with Kim, like you were saying, like, when she was going after Pete on his lack of guts to talk to these, because you make peace with enemies. You don't make peace with allies. If you just meet with your allies, what good does that do the world? What good does that do the economies of the world? Nothing.
Exactly.
It brings nothing.
Exactly.
And Trump meeting with Kim, you might say, you could criticize him because it didn't go anywhere. That's a criticism of him. Hey, you met with him, but you didn't get anything out of it. What the hell is that all about? That's a good criticism.
Well, I mean, then there's no guarantee. But the one thing I would say he did get at least from it is they were launching missiles over Japan like clockwork. I think they may have launched one short-range missile within the last year to 2 years at this point. That they did launch, I know of one, but I don't think they sent it all the way over Japan. Japan was getting missiles launched over them, on a regular basis pre-Trump sitting down with him. That's why Trump started calling him Rocket Man.
That's what happens when you talk to people, is that you start getting these, like, okay, now we can kind of, come to the table. Yeah. And if anything, it's like, I would say that has a large part to do with our record with these nations. Because if you think about it, Gaddafi and Libya, we said, hey, we want you to give up all your weaponizing stuff, programming and all that. And he's like, all right, I'll do it. Don't just leave me alone. I just want to carry on in Libya. And we still toppled him. And then Hillary went in there and gave her famous lines of, we came, we saw, he died. And, if I'm North Korea and I'm looking at the world stage and I see that the United States betrayed this guy, I'm going to be less prone to give up my weapons. And if anything, I'm going to say, well, now I got to have my own nuclear program as a deterrent to this bully. So, I can see how Kim is kind of like hesitant because, he's like, how am I going to trust the United States when they're doing all this stuff?
Yep.
And it speaks to the larger agenda of, like, the Bush, Clinton, Obama, and Trump, philosophy, that a lot of, like Tulsi Gabbard and Bernie, I can see them not kind of ending up doing the same thing. Andrew Yang, I can kind of see him doing that. I think Andrew Yang would be very beneficial for us on the home front. I don't know too much about his foreign policy. I have questions there.
Well, it's not really an expertise of his either.
Right. So,
that's not really
I would
his
hope
thing.
that he surrounds himself with good people.
Yeah, and that's ideally what he should do. He's got an idea for how to affect, things here at home. So when it comes to the other issues, he needs to get the right people. Let's say, for example, it is Andrew Yang who gets the nomination, or Bernie Sanders who got the nomination. Without a doubt, your Secretary of Defense needs to be Tulsi Gabbard.
Yeah,
You
definitely.
know,
I think Andrew Yang would be
uh,
open to that because you see them, really having a good relationship, and the camps are getting along really well online. The Yang Gang,
right?
supports Tulsi Gabbard fans, and the Tulsi Gabbard fans come out in support of Yang. The Bernie fans are the ones that I really get upset over because they're so like they have their Bernie blinders on, and
Well, and there's
and it's
there's so
really
many
pushed by
people
like you,
too.
yeah, it's pushed by
Yeah.
the fake progressives online.
Yeah, yeah, and a lot of people are just not, policy geeks like you and me who read into these things and do a lot of studying. I've seen clips, of mainstream media going into these some of these rallies, and I think there's like a list of, well, who do you prefer? Who would you like? And then you get like Bernie and Klobuchar within the same list
Right,
from the same person. It's
right,
like, okay, one's here,
right.
the
And the other
other's
one's all the way over
here.
there. Yeah.
What do you like about them that you found so in common that you like the both of them? I mean, have you really, or are you just listening to what they're telling you on television?
It's like
You
the
know?
fact that Biden supporters' second choice is Bernie Sanders, right? It's like they're miles
Yeah,
apart on policies, but for
yeah,
some reason that speaks to like the disinformation success that the mainstream media has been able to orchestrate on the public because nobody has a check on them, and the people who do have a check on them are the corporations that fund them and the special interest groups and the military industrial complex who have their agenda to push. And instead of being protectors of the public, they are the guard dogs of these big entities pushing their what they want on
yeah.
the American people, which is just sad. But I mean,
And
it
give
only
you a
hurts the.
personal story on
Yeah,
that
go ahead.
one, just real quick. When you talk about how the mainstream media has been really pushing a lot, so people, because of mainstream media, became more familiar. Even though there were a lot of people who wouldn't cover Bernie in 2016, Bernie became much more of a household name after that, and so a lot of people know him going into this race. My mom was a big, big Bernie guy back in 2016.
Yeah,
She's one of the only Democrats that came from my side of the family, and
right.
she still considers herself a Democrat to this day.
Mm.
Okay, um, then she was big on Bernie, and she doesn't really get on here a lot. She hasn't really watched much of my YouTube stuff since I started this channel.
Hmm.
We were talking the other night. She sent me a link about Bernie,
Yeah.
right? And then I just sent her a message back and said, I would still prefer Tulsi Gabbard. And you know what her response was?
What?
Who is that?
Yeah.
She had no clue who Tulsi Gabbard
Well,
was.
that's the
Okay.
thing is that like these camps don't support each. The left is so divisive, and I was talking to my buddy on another live stream about how if you look at the right, when Trump went after their party, the core
Yeah.
of the Republican Party said yes, let's do this. Like, let's line up against these MFers because, and even Ted Cruz and all them ended up lining up being little, uh, yes men to Trump because they knew they
Well, of
don't go
course.
against the voters. And the Democratic
Yeah.
Party, unfortunately, can't do that because all these camps are so Puritan. And you can have your disagreements, but still line up and like get ready for this battle. And I just think that like the Bernie camp really perpetuates this divisiveness amongst the Tulsi Yang allegiance because that is the ally right there. The Tulsi and the Yang folks, those are your allies, and you should be
Hmm.
pushing them up so that people don't say who's Tulsi Gabbard, who's Andrew Yang. No, they know who
Exactly.
Andrew Yang is. They know who Tulsi Gabbard is when they're from the Bernie supporting camp because those are your allies who will stand with you at the brokered convention. But I mean, what do you make of that? Like that
Yep.
whole like infighting thing in the left.
It's definitely true. A lot of them take the tactic. Okay, for example, and we can even tie this back into TYT, why they went for Hillary instead of someone like Jill Stein, like Jimmy Dore did, for example.
Right.
Jill Stein was probably the closest thing running in that election to Bernie Sanders. You were for Bernie Sanders.
Right.
Okay. Um, the problem is they take the tone of, well, no, you need to support this candidate because they're close to who you like, but they've got the chance of winning. These people, look what they're polling at. And of course, we're going to base this off polls that were really, really wrong in 2016. Okay. So they're going to look at that and say, look what this poll says. These people have no chance of winning the election. So if you go out and you vote for them, you're pretty much wasting your vote. You could be out here supporting this candidate. He's
and
close.
It's your fault. They'll say it's your fault. But then
Bingo.
when you
and
see
then
the
they'll say
lasting
that
effects
you should at least get behind Bernie and Elizabeth Warren, because a lot of people are taking this misconception that Elizabeth Warren is really the next best thing and that she's some true progressive. Elizabeth Warren is a fraud. Yeah. She's a fraud.
And her lasting effects are going to be worse than supporting a third party candidate like Jill Stein. Like when I look at those people, like the Sam Cedar people, and say, okay, you blame those people for the fucking Clinton election. Who is to blame for all the agendas that the Clinton machine would have implemented that would have put the party or put the progressive left agenda further back and would have made it harder, just because you get incrementalism and stuff like that. But it's kind of like a slow death, really, that they're advocating for. And it reminds me of like the Tea Party and the right. They were willing to destroy their party, to fix it. And you might say, well, the Tea Party was funded by all these millionaire Koch brothers, blah, blah, blah. But look at the commitment that the voters had to go against it and say, yeah, we might lose a couple terms in Congress. We might lose majorities. We might do that. But we're going to turn this damn party to what we want it to do. Yeah. And you kind of see an attempt here on the left, but there's just so many camps that are unwilling to work with each other.
Well, and the two things you need to take away from that is this, okay? I think Jesse Ventura put it best about, the whole argument about why you should vote for Hillary over the third party candidate. You don't vote, of course, and that argument was because if you vote third party, you're going to give it to Trump. You don't vote against someone. You vote for someone.
Right.
You're supposed to go out and vote for who you think is going to do the best job. And there's never going to be a chance for a third party to ever possibly get anywhere if we just keep giving it to the main two, simply because we feel like if we vote third party, it's a wasted vote. You're never going to get anywhere that way. They're going to keep their control on the whole system going. And this concept of trying to come in and, while I admire, take over what the Democratic Party has become, you're fighting a big uphill battle there. There's a lot of money. There's a lot of power. There's a lot of influence that have already been controlling that party for about 20 years or more. Okay?
Yeah.
So that's going to be very hard to do, which leads me to point number 2 that Tulsi's brought up. And that is the ranked choice voting. Instead of having a system like what we have right now, go to ranked choice voting. Me personally, I would still try to keep some electoral. I know a lot of people want the electoral college gone. Most people that I've heard say that come from towns where it would be their hometown or their state or something that would really be one of the ones people would want to campaign in anyway. Right. Somebody like South Carolina would get swept under the rug. Okay, people in my state would never be heard from again. Okay, so that's one thing about the electoral college. But I think if you take a hybrid of ranked choice voting with the electoral college, for example, and the way the electoral college process works, the ranked choice voting process works. Are you familiar much with that?
Yeah, so the ranked choice voting is like you vote for your favorite, your least favorite, just kind of go down the line. So like Tulsi,
you
Bernie,
go in the order
Yang,
as to how you would prefer them to be.
Right.
Okay, in which case that means
and which party
you really wouldn't be wasting your vote. If I preferred the third party's candidate over whoever is going to be the people in 2016, I had, out of the Green Party or the Libertarian one I preferred more, I could put them number 1 and then say, but if they don't make the cut, then here's my number 2.
Right.
And you're not affected by it at that point, in which case that then takes away a lot of that fear in the first place about even voting third party. And I think when you start seeing a lot of more people voting that third party, taking it away from the Republican and the Democrat because they're not afraid of it at that point. once you start seeing a lot of that, then there's going to actually be some competitions for those parties to, to possibly, start playing the way the people want you to play. Otherwise, they'll just go vote for somebody else, and they're not afraid that it's going to cost, some election to the one they least favored, because you can rank them how you'd prefer them.
Yeah, and a lot of countries in Europe do that, anyways.
Yeah.
And they have their parliamentary system and everything like that. But I do think that eventually the fundamental change of this whole two-party system is going to change. I don't know. I mean, it might be a long time from now, but it just has to happen. And I think everybody knows that subconsciously, that this thing can't keep going, because it's a tug and war situation that just doesn't benefit anybody. And it's really the reason and the cause that we've, had such incremental change in such a slow pace that, it's fucking, it's sad. It's really kind of stagnated, or caused like a stagnation effect. And, nothing can be passed. And it's like, oh, well, bipartisanship. You only see bipartisanship when it comes to war stuff or corporate stuff. That's the only time you see these two parties get together and actually pass something, because it benefits them. They're funded by these interest groups. Like, they're funded by Goldman Sachs. They're funded by the military-industrial complex. So I always get scared when they say, oh, this bipartisan measure has passed the Senate and the House. And it's like, what the hell was in that? Because it's not going to benefit anybody who's in the working class.
And just to name off a few of those, well-known bipartisan measures that we've had within the last 20 years, not that it made it through Congress or the Senate, but the War Powers Act, pretty much giving all that stuff to Bush.
Yep.
Hillary Clinton supported the war in Iraq. All the Republicans are pretty much, except for like Ron Paul and a handful, were behind the war in Iraq, and the right and the left demonized anyone who spoke out against it. Okay, the Patriot Act, all that stuff, that was right wing, left wing working together, hand in hand, singing "Kumbaya" the whole way.
If you think about it, the only real issues and differences that they have at this point are the culture issues, the culture war stuff.
Yeah,
and they keep perpetuating that because they know it divides the country and it gets votes, because it uses fear. So, and
exactly.
that's the biggest weapon they use right now. And you could disagree on cultural issues, but I think they do a bad job of bringing people together on economic stuff, where I think most of the American people are mostly united on. The working class is mostly united on, good social programs that are going to help and that are universal, because universal programs are harder to tear apart from more right-leaning conservative folks who want to, cut budgets. If everyone's benefiting from it, it's harder to attack that, because they're going to be like, well, hold on now. I don't want you to, reduce anything from that. I use that. I benefit from that. It's helped me get this house. It's helped me get this car. It's hard to tear that down. So, it's just sad. I can talk about that all day, but man. Was there any other stories you wanted to bring up here?
Not really off the top of my head. Just a couple of other things I could think of, maybe and I think I made mention of this to you in the, pre-video here. We were talking back and forth a little bit. The big thing with the polls, I guess, just one last thing I want to touch on is, as far as their accuracy.
Sure, yeah, let's go.
Just point out some simple stats. So Bloomberg just jumped into the race, and even Pac-Man, because the way I found that video I mentioned earlier, he basically put a thing out on YouTube earlier, and I'm not subscribed to him. It just popped up where he gave a little narrative, almost like a Facebook post, and basically said, we talked about this a month ago. I predicted it, and now he's polling at 6%. Okay, so he's polling at 6%. Now, mainstream media is trying to kiss this guy's butt up one side and down the other, right? I just released a video the other day where a CNN news anchor was, how come he's getting treated so horribly? How come there's such negative coverage of this guy? Blah, 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 blah. And please, Mr. Bloomberg, I welcome you into this race. Take my sugary drink. And I can't remember this guy's name, his first name, but I think his last name was like Smirkanish or something like that.
Yeah, I think I know who you're talking about.
I said in my video, I'm like, I just got one question. How does it feel to give Michael Bloomberg a human colonoscopy? Because your head was so far up this guy's ass in this whole video.
Yeah.
I mean, it was absolutely ridiculous. Now, my concern is this. Even on those news networks where you're hearing things like that, for example, everybody they've interviewed that I've seen, it doesn't seem to be too much behind this guy. They're saying he should have jumped in early on, okay, that he should have gotten into the race like everyone else, okay, and that he shouldn't have done it this late, or just that the field's already too crowded. We got enough people running. I just don't think he should be in it. Something along those lines, right? And proof of, I think, the reception that people trying to jump in this late in the game are getting, take Deval Patrick, who drew 2 people to Morehouse College. Yeah, that's some rally. But yet they're saying he's got this polling percentage. He's polling so well, and they also say Kamala Harris is ahead of Tulsi and Yang, who are in danger of not even making the next round of debates. Yet they're still bringing in a lot of grassroots fundraising. Andrew Yang just had a massive month, like $750,000
in one day.
Right. But Kamala Harris had to fire a lot of her staff and start taking PAC money to hang into this thing.
Yeah,
now, if the people are more behind you than them, why is that not reflecting in your
polls,
finances and your donations?
Right.
That's why I'm very, very, very skeptical of these polls.
And what's funny?
The last thing is, do what?
Really quickly, what's funny is that these polling, like the polling agencies and everything like that.
Yeah.
What's funny is that the DNC and all of them have put in this like qualifying measure, so they're using it as a weapon against these progressive candidates, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Kind of as a gatekeeper thing,
Yeah.
because they get to nitpick which polls they consider qualifying in quotations. But
that's it.
Go ahead and finish your thought.
What was it? Real quick to add to what you just said. A Suffolk Boston Globe poll has Tulsi over 6%. DNC recognizes Suffolk poll, right?
Yes.
They won't recognize that poll, and if
because
they would
it has
recognize
Tulsi at 6%.
Yep. And if they would, she's already, I think the qualification for the next round of the debate is you had to hit 6% in 2 polls. They've recognized one. If they would recognize that one, and I'm not exactly clear on what their excuse is for that particular one, but they won't recognize it. And if they would, she'd be in the next round of debates. And
they
so
they want to keep her out so bad.
Oh, of course. And now it's even to the point that they pretend on MSNBC that she doesn't even exist.
Yeah, and
they exclude her picture from graphs on the screen.
Yeah, the latest CNN polling thing from John King, he does some show, I don't know what it's called, but he was doing a segment, and I covered this, where they excluded Tulsi Gabbard out of that. Like, they had Yang, but Tulsi was nowhere to be found on their polling thing.
Exactly.
They had like all these other. They had Kamala. They had Steyer.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and the Steyer, that's another joke too, man. Good Lord. But last thing that I wanted to say is on the whole, like, the Bloomberg issue. For all the people pushing his narrative, you got Packman saying they'd prefer to have him over Donald Trump. He's got this great, or better message, as he put it, than Donald Trump. I think all those more or less neo-progressives are going to try and jump behind Bloomberg if he was able to make it far enough and whatever. They're supporting a guy like Bloomberg, and yet, rumor has it that he was more or less pushed by a lot of people behind the scenes, like Jeff Bezos, for example, to run for president. Now, Jeff Bezos, as many people probably already know, I'm sure you know, getting away with paying almost like nothing in federal taxes. Okay? I'm sure, me and you have to pay federal taxes like clockwork, and if we don't, they put us in jail. Right. He's taken every loophole under the sun, getting out of paying all these federal taxes, okay, and yet he's pushing a guy with $54 billion to run for president, supposedly. And like I put in a video the other day, Bloomberg gave a speech just last year talking about how it's actually beneficial when you do raise taxes on the poor and don't pander to them. Yeah, and the examples he gave was like taxing your sugary drink, or more or less taxing your, bad or unhealthy habits or whatever that you might enjoy. We need to raise taxes on you because it's going to influence your decision making more.
Yeah.
You know
Yeah, it's like, oh
that.
well, oh my god, his yeah, I saw that and it just fucking that triggered the shit out of me cuz I was like, you
Oh,
fucking
me too, man.
elitist piece of shit. Like, are you
Yeah,
kidding me? You're such a
you got this silver spoon jackass with $54 billion in the bank trying to
trying to
talk
tell
about,
us, yeah.
how you need to live. You know what? I've got an idea. This wouldn't necessarily affect Bloomberg, but if we're going to talk about taxing people for their bad habits, why don't we tax politicians every time that we get involved in another conflict? Because they're the ones that are supposed to be controlling us going into war. They're
Yeah.
supposed to be the diplomats. Why isn't there a war tax on all politicians anytime we get involved in a conflict?
Yeah, or make it like a thing where they have to send their kids in and
Yeah,
enlist their kids to go.
exactly. I've heard that argument too. But why aren't we taxing some of these rich and powerful's bad habits? Because apparently taxing them, by the analogy he gave, doesn't produce results like it does when you tax the poor people.
Mhm.
So I mean, for
And
anybody who's
didn't
going to
we
try and
already
jump
go
on,
through that, like the whole trickle down thing?
exactly. And it's not getting us where they said it was, because you're missing a big, in my opinion, you're missing a big chunk of that puzzle. Yeah, if you gave them more money to do the right thing, but you're expecting them to do the right thing. You're not putting strings attached that
Yeah,
say you
because it's
only get this by
you.
doing the right thing.
Damn, you
You
know what?
know?
You bring up a good point, and I kind of wanted to get into this real quick before we end the stream
Yeah.
about how if you give them more like less taxes and more money to spend, because they always talk about, well, these government programs run away, but there's oversight on those government programs. We know exactly what every single penny is going to. We can track that
Right.
data and see it.
Right.
But all of this fancy, like, well, the millionaire is going to invest in, where are those receipts? How do you track that? How do you track where every little penny that you give in tax breaks to the rich impacts the middle class in a good way? Give me those receipts. Where is that data that I can see and hold and say, oh, so and so company invested 1.5 million in hiring 800 new jobs or 80 new jobs in Massachusetts. Oh, they opened a new firm here. No, you don't get to see any of that. You just got to
No.
trust that the millionaires and the billionaires and the elites are going to invest that money appropriately, and it's going to
And
trickle over to you.
and the only tax receipt, I guess you could say, that you are going to get when they do that is in the stock market, when they start using that money to do stock buybacks.
Right, but that's not even a good measure of where the average
No,
Joe
no,
is.
it's not.
That's a
It's
good
not
measure of
helping
where
the
the
people
company
at
is.
all. No, no. All they're doing with it, the only time you will be able to really trace what they're doing with that money is when the tax breaks hit, and then you start seeing them buying their own stock back. You know what they're doing with their money, but you're not ever going to
Mhm.
see any statistics on how they're actually reinvesting it back into the people. You're just going to have to take, their word for it that they're
Right.
going to do it. Take mainstream media's word for it that they may be doing it, and
And how much
hope
is
that
that
they.
is going to overseas operations, to foreign
It,
countries?
Exactly.
You know?
And if all you're gonna do, put it like this, as my grandpa told me years ago, if all you're gonna do is base this whole thing on hopes, hope in one hand, crap in the other, and see which one fills up first.
Right.
That hoping
That's,
they're gonna do it ain't gonna get you anywhere.
nope.
So
All right. So one last thing I always try to interject this into my conversations with people is, I can tell we both kind of have these conservative streaks, right? So I have a lot of
right,
like right wing friends, and this is one thing that I always bring up to them is, especially because they have such a like trust in this like, capitalism, individualism thing. You see like Steven Crowder's and all those people who push this and all that.
yes,
My
yes,
arguments would all my argument to them would always be, you guys have you have such a love and a respect for family values, conservatism, preserving the
yep,
family unit,
yep,
and ethics and morality. What
yep,
happens when you introduce a hyper competitive system, capitalism? What happens to those morals, values, ethics, and family values? An individual is going to put those in the back burner. He's going to put them in the back seat because his
yep,
first thought is, I have to put food on my table and I have to
yep.
survive. So when you have
Oh yeah,
no safety net, you can't nurture the family. You can't nurture
No,
those
you
values.
can't.
So you have
You can't.
women becoming, they go into the industries we all, these conservatives all hate. Women get more, you know what I mean? The woman has to sell her
Yep.
own body to put food on her table. The
Yep.
person has to get 2-3 jobs, so he's not going to start a
Yep.
family. So if you really want a conservative, social society that doesn't pervert itself, that doesn't, get into these culture war situations, then you would be supportive of, and conservatives used to be very supportive of, safety net styles programs that still maintain
And the
the
reason why
capitalist
is because
system.
that's what pulled us through the Great Depression under FDR.
Right, and it's still, you still preserve a capitalist system. Sneakers aren't
Yeah.
going to be made by the government, right? You're still going to have businesses and firms, but you take away
Exactly.
that perverse hyper competitiveness, that perverse hyper individualism, and
Yep.
you allow the nurturing of these moral, ethical, social characteristics that Americans used to, they have this nostalgia for in the early 50s and 60s.
Yep.
You can
Yep.
reinstate those. And
And
that is the way to really be conservative.
one example that I think sums that up more than anything, okay? And I'm from South Carolina, deep red state, deep South, a lot of these, and I grew up with my grandparents for quite a few years there too. And so I met a lot of older people at a young age. That's why not many people actually guess my actual age when they talk to me and realize just how young I am.
Right.
But basically, take for example church. Church that I used to go to when I was a kid. Okay,
Mhm.
They were so strict in their thinking about Sundays, for example, and that whole traditional thing about because then respect the Sabbath day and keep
Right,
it
right.
holy and all that stuff. Okay, they wouldn't even go out to eat on Sunday. Now people do that all the time now, leaving church,
Oh, yeah,
but
yeah.
that particular one, oh no, you don't do that. You don't cut your grass on Sunday. You don't do a lot of physical labor on Sunday.
Right.
That's why it wasn't even until 2016 they legalized you could buy alcohol in South Carolina on Sundays
Right.
because they have to maintain a job working Sundays.
Right.
I have to work every Sunday.
Right.
So
What happened to those traditions,
exactly,
It's
exactly.
because of
It
these.
hit the back burner. Bingo. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, man. So I appreciate, this conversation. I think we really covered a lot of a lot of topics here.
Yeah, definitely.
Really put a lot out there. Yeah. I would definitely welcome you back on the channel, and for everybody that's still watching, definitely go check out the Independent Report. Right?
Yes, sir.
Yep, the Independent Report on YouTube, and follow him on Twitter at Vigilant Independent. I got your Twitter up here, so people will be able to find you.
Okay.
Yeah, man.
right.
Definitely welcome back on the show. I'd love to do another get together. Maybe do
Yeah.
something for the upcoming 5th or 6th debate. I think it is now.
Yeah, I'd love to.
Maybe
Yeah,
do some
definitely.
prediction stuff.
Okay. Yeah,
All right, man.
definitely, man.
All right.
I appreciate you having
everybody.
me on. And
Yeah.
look forward to coming back.
All right, everybody. Take care. Definitely gonna